Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me in another video. While we've been talking about what's been happening at Celine as a brand, and I've really enjoyed talking about it, now we are closing this chapter with Hedi leaving. I'm not gonna lie, it does make me feel just, I guess, sad. I definitely will continue talking about this brand, but what sparked me to create this video was Celine actually just took down the majority of their Instagram posts, and a lot of people have been talking about it on social media. They took down all but 4 videos on their YouTube page. I know Hedi just left, but it wasn't even a week and they took down everything, almost all of his work. Now there's a lot of speculation. Is this because these are Hedi's photographs? He owns these photographs, or is it just this thing that these brands do where they just like to wipe the slate clean whenever there's a new creative director? When Hedi left YSL, we saw this happen. Maybe this is just a thing that brands are doing now to say, hey, we're in this new era, let's get rid of the old and start something new. But I just kind of feel like this is just unnecessarily dramatic. I don't know, that's just me. And this happened when Hedi joined Celine. If you remember, he wiped the slate clean again when Phoebe Philo left. And now we are witnessing the same thing here, Michael Ryder doing the same thing again. I just feel it's very dramatic. We're even seeing creative directors do this. John Galliano wiped his Instagram earlier this year, as well as Kim Jones did the same thing. It's just, I think, an interesting move on these designers and these brands. Honestly, just from a customer perspective, it's just kind of annoying. One thing that is just very confusing to me about this move, and I just wonder, was this really thought through? Because there is still yet to be the makeup launch. There were these shorts promoting the new product, so I think it's very interesting that they took that down, and that's gonna be launched sometime later on this month. In addition, there's 2 fragrances they have yet to release. One's going to be coming next year, the Hedi France, and then I forget the name of the other one, but that is also to be launched in 2026. So they still have Hedi era pieces, as well as these recent shows that we've seen are to be launched spring 2025. So they've wiped the social media, so we can't even see these images. It's a little bit interesting that they are doing this right now. Not sure what the motive behind this move is. Is it just because these photos are Hedi era photos and they're his photos, his work, or is it because they're just wiping the slate clean? But I thought in today's video, rather than just feeling down about the state of Celine, I thought about talking about my top 10 favorite collections from the Hedi Slimane era. Just go through some of my favorite looks, some things that I just thought were worth mentioning. And I hope I can find enough footage. And it is hard to find a lot of these images because obviously we can't find these images on Vogue. It almost feels like this era never happened because a lot of it is not documented on Vogue. It's no longer on YouTube. Very little of it is on their social media pages. I thought we would make this video celebrating this era. So the first collection that I want to talk about is Fall 2019. He did have a collection prior to that, and it was the Spring 2019 collection. That was his debut collection. And while I don't think it's a terrible collection, it's not my favorite, but in hindsight, actually, there's a lot of pieces I would actually want to wear now, but there was a lot of backlash on that Spring 2019 debut collection. And just for context, if you remember that time, so the collection was shown Fall 2018. This was during that hashtag Me Too era. There was also this after effect feeling of the US election. And again, I'm not making this a political video, so let's keep it chill in the comments, but a lot of people felt a certain kind of way after that election. And in contrast, you had someone like Phoebe Philo who did this very sartorial, artsy, feminine, flowy style, which in many ways is very different and very much an opposite to what Hedi Slimane does. With his first collection, we saw a very 80s, but also 60s, hints of that as well, continuation of his later YSL works, but it just didn't hit. It just didn't feel of the time. The sequins, the sparkling dresses, the polka dots, the studs, the sleazy, messy hair, the girls that were bald. I don't think women were really in this party mood, party vibe. I also think in the 2010s, there was this rise of girl boss feminism feminism that I think really took a hit when Trump was elected. Again, I don't want to make this a whole political video, but I vividly remember the day of the 2016 US election. Celine dropped their resort collection. This was under Phoebe Philo, and a lot of it was women in pantsuits. Phoebe Philo is not going to give you a whole thesis on her collection, but you just know what it's about when you see it. Fashion at that time was just in a different mood, in different direction, and I remember at the time there were a lot of critiques of this collection. Not only was it just didn't feel politically of the time, but there was also the rising designer of the time was Demna's Balenciaga, as well as Logomania. And I think we would see Logomania continue in the later 10s. This sort of continuation of that sleazy party YSL vibe just did not hit. While I thought there were some great looks, like honestly, I actually look at a lot of pieces from this period and I really want it from that first collection. We also saw the Celine 16, which took inspiration from the 60s. And that bag did do better in later years. Again, people wanted things like logos around this time period, 2018. We were starting to see the rise of more collaborations with luxury brands, and this just didn't feel it was of that time. So when it came to, I think, fall 2019, what Celine as a brand and what Hedi did, while he was going into the archive with the first collection, he really wanted to emphasize this move. While the first collection was a little bit 80s, with the second collection, he really wanted to go into that 70s era. When you look at a lot of old advertisements of this era, there was a lot of marketing around this, more material on this era of this old Celine era. Celine Vipiana, the founder, this was what she was known for in certain neighborhoods in Paris. This was the style that he wanted to emphasize. It was really about going back into the archives and finding pieces that felt relevant for the time, but also was through the lens of Hedi. And then we got this collection, and I thought this was a beautiful collection. It was very Catherine Deneuve, very 70s Parisian, elegant, Saint Germain. We had longer skirts, pleated culottes, neck scarves. We saw beautiful khakis and suedes, camels, also ruffled collars, pussy bows. And of course, it's Hedi, so we're gonna have sequins, embellishment, animal print. He's definitely not a minimalist. He does have this French flair, this Parisian charm, but I think what he was able to do with this collection was tap into something that was more sophisticated, chic, but rock and roll by way of Jane Birkin or a Francois Hardy. I love these metallic gold leopard print dresses with the capes. Just beautiful. It's definitely felt more elevated. I think this was just a beautiful collection. While Hedi is someone that gets criticized for being a designer with his own distinct point of view in comparison to a Phoebe Philo or Michael Kors, former creative directors at Celine, I don't think the history of Celine has ever been as highly looked into as the Hedi era. So the next collection that I want to talk about is Celine Spring 2020. So this was the collection that first spoke to me. I've talked about it before. It was the collection where I watched it and then I went into the store and I was like, yes, this is actually good. We saw a lot more denim on denim, a lot more flare jeans, that continuation of the 70s, very Francois Hardy, very Nico, but remember seeing the Triumph bag and I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the bag that Celine has needed. And they did have it previous runway collections, but they really concentrated on this bag, this collection, and I just think it really worked. The jackets were really cute with the embroidery. I love these high-waisted pleated pants that flare out. They kind of have this skirt movement to them. I love these scarf looks. And just even in the course of 1 year, we are seeing a total evolution of this brand. And I think a lot of people say he has a very distinct style and he does the same thing, but when you look at his evolution from his Dior days to his YSL days, both times, this is very different. Next, I want to talk about Celine Winter 2020. I think this is probably one of the top 3 collections that I just love from this era of Celine. If I were to get a pair of platform shoes, these are the kinds of shoes I would want. I love the almond toe. I love the straps, the T-bar. A lot of them came in, it looks like exotics. I don't know if this is real python. I think there's also something very reptilian about Hedi Slimane's work as well. I loved the velvet moments. I loved the mixture with ruffles. I would love to have so many pieces in this collection. Even on the men's side, this leopard men's tuxedo jacket, I would wear it. For the first few collections at Celine, we definitely saw this 70s, late 60s theme happen, but then the pandemic happened, and then what Hedi started doing were these fashion films. His first few collections, they just were very Gen Z flimsy coated TikTok in TikTok's early days. The wider pants, knit pieces. A lot of these collections had really cool themes, collections on racetracks or motorcyclists. But I think the collection that got a lot of people talking about Celine on the menswear side was the collection Teen Night Poem. So this was fall 2021. While I would have said, even just a few months ago, I would have said Hedi is first and foremost a menswear designer. I do think it is his first love, but I think his last Celine collection made me change my mind. But I've always appreciated his women's wear comes from the side of menswear, which may seem counterintuitive, but for those really good jackets, really good jeans, really good trousers, they always look so good. This Teen Night Poem collection was a pivotal moment for Celine because it showed how he really can create these worlds, create these storylines in a short film. They always existed on the runway, but even more so with these interesting locations. They're in this beautiful castle, so there are these moments of regal dressing with the embellished collars, but then we also have something rebellious with these studs and leather. It felt TikTok e-boy, but then it had this regal, rebellious touch. I thought this collection was so good. Like, there's some pieces from this, even though it's a menswear collection, I would love to wear this as a woman. Next, we have Women's Winter 2022. So this was the Dom Perry collection. I would say for the women's side, this was my favorite, I guess, of these pandemic era collections. This was probably my favorite. I just felt like the whole collection was so good. So many definably Celine by Hedi Slimane, but also felt the Celine heritage, but it felt way more casual. The fits were so relaxed. Jackets a little bit bigger, the pants a little bit looser. And I think he really truly took a page from the personal style of Kaya Gerber and Lisa, who are some of his muses. This is actually the direction Celine wants to go. Something sporty, chic. This is probably why they picked Michael Ryder. Also, he worked with Phoebe, but someone that can give that preppy, sporty American touch to the brand. I think that's the direction that Celine is going to go if I have to like guess. So Hedi showed he could do a little bit of that, but he's also going to have those party dress looks. And I also love Dom Perry. It's probably like one of my favorite Celine fragrances. And a lot of these collections sort of had themes around their perfumes. Like there was one collection, Parade, very beautiful. Next we have probably one of my favorite collections at Celine, and this was Seline at the Wiltern. So I did a whole video on this, and to me this is him to his core, that like rock and roll glam. And especially there was that scene at the end with these rock and roll goddesses with their metallic slip dresses. They looked sleazy but also glamorous at the same time. This was a collection where he was doing what he wanted to do. It was in LA. It was one of the rare live Celine shows post-pandemic, but there's something about this show, about the energy of the show, as well as after the show they had DJ sets and live performances. And I think that was the whole theme. We're out of the pandemic, now let's get together, let's party, let's have a good time. The next collection that we saw was a collection I never talked about on my channel, but I would say it's probably one of my favorite of the men's collections, one of them, and it was the Seline Mens Summer 2024 Delusional Daydream. I felt like this was Hedi's proposition for a men's Chanel line. Here's what I think about Hedi and Chanel. I think he will only go to that brand if he can do menswear. I've said this before, but Chanel is a women's wear brand and Hedi is, his first love is men's. I think his most creative works actually come on the menswear side, or they are informed from a menswear perspective. That's why I wonder if he would go to Chanel, or I could see him being on the men's side of Chanel. But anyways, there are a lot of these jackets that felt like they could be Chanel-esque men's jackets. Just like the ballet theme, this image of a male ballet dancer, very strong and graceful, just a beautiful point of inspiration. I want to do a thorough review of this collection, but I remember I was really busy at the time, but I really wish I did. And I love how they reference the song Losing My Edge by LCD Sound System. It's such a defining indie hipster song of the 2000s. So the next collection I want to talk about is the Triumph collection, or the Arc de Triomphe collection. Again, this went back to the origins of the Triumph, the 60s exploration, really deeply 60s. This was where even just the history of the brand, just looking into the history of the brand, this is where Celine really expanded into the women's wear fashion side. That's why we saw a lot of the looks that felt very 60s. I did a whole review on that collection. It just felt like a bit of a turning point for Celine as a brand in that there was something just way more elegant. It was less sleazy. less rock and roll. It was very beautiful. It didn't have that Seline at the Wit turn, messy hair rock and roll vibes. It was way more refined, way more sophisticated. One of the themes of this collection was the photography of Richard Avedon, who was in many ways like a mentor to Hedi in his photography. A lot of the photography he did around Audrey Hepburn. So you definitely see that that is a huge point of inspiration here and a huge reference point. And it makes me wonder if this is foreshadowing something. And then the next collection I want to talk about is the last Seline Mens collection we saw. It was very preppy, mixed with themes around dressing like a dandy. We saw a little bit of David Bowie, a little bit of Oscar Wilde, but I think also these kind of English boarding school vibes. I thought with this collection, this very preppy style, this very preppy direction made me think that this was Hedi and I think Celine probably as a brand wanting to transition to what we will probably see the new era of Celine be, something a little bit more preppy. I don't know, I could be wrong. It may not be preppy at all. Knowing that Michael Ryder comes from Ralph Lauren's diffusion line, Polo, this was his way of saying this makes sense, so if he does something similar, it will kind of line up. And I do think this sort of preppy thing is something Celine has been sort of flirting with the Polo designer. It will be able to be even more so that way, but from like a Parisian brand. I did a recent deep dive on that collection, so check that out. And then finally, probably also one of my favorite top 3 collections from Celine is the Hedi France. Again, I did a whole recent review, but I'll reiterate this was probably my favorite show of fashion month. Of course, I'm very biased. The whole collection made me want to be like a 60s femme fatale. Of course, there was the elephant in the room, was the whole Chanel discussion, right? Could this be a sign that Hedi is going to Chanel? Like, again, I would love to see it. I'm not gonna lie, I would love to see it. I could just imagine Hedi pulling from different decades of the various Parisian cultural eras. I think he could go back 50s, 20s. Like, can you imagine Hedi doing something 1920s? Anyways, doing a cultural Parisian deep dive into that brand, going into the music and design styles of that era. I could just absolutely see it. But this collection was his final collection at the Celine. Much like the way he left YSL, I think he left it on a really high note. His last collection at YSL was a couture collection, and there were a lot more couture looks in this collection. Of course, a lot of really great ready-to-wear pieces. But yeah, seeing this recent direction towards the 60s era, this hard 60s turn with a lot of these looks, specifically the Parisian left bank iteration of the 60s. I don't know if he's going to Chanel. I would love to see it, of course. I would love to see it. I think he could do any decade, really. He will always be very Hedi coded, but he really does enjoy looking into the history, be it the 70s, the 80s, the 60s. He loves to look at the music culture, the party culture, what made that time and era so exciting, but he also likes to put it through the lens of now. So yes, anyways, guys, that is my video on the top 10 Celine collections. These are my picks, obviously, but I would love to know what is your favorite Celine Hedi era collection. It was just fun to look at some of his works. It was just great to take a look down memory lane. I really hope I can get enough footage for this. I do think I have some of this saved, but I don't know if I have all of it, if I can even just reference some of my older videos. But it does make me sad that a lot of this feels, with the Instagram being almost wiped, the YouTube channel being wiped, it's almost like it never happened. So I just want to celebrate this era, but it's also the message of Hedi France. Just enjoy the time you had, but nothing is going to last forever. So that's my video. Thank you so much for joining me in another one, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.